One self-nature, and the word here is Svabhava, I teach, which is removed from speculation and thought construction, which belongs to the exquisite spiritual realm of the wise, removed from the two Svabhavas, that is, the Parikalpita and the Paratantra. So we've got a new word here, Svabhava, which is translated here as self-nature. And this is quite interesting, isn't it? Because we're often told that reality is without self-nature. There's no self. But now we have this word Svabhava, which means self-nature. And this is what the Buddha teaches. So there is such a thing as self-nature. And Professor Suzuki says something about these three Svabhavas in his introduction to his translation of the Lankavatara Sutra. It's on page 34 of the introduction, and I'll read out some bits of it. So Svabhava means self-nature, or self-reality, or self-substance. And there are three Svabhavas. And the first refers to imagined objects, and that's the meaning of the word Parikalpita. So the first Svabhava is this Parikalpita, and this is imagination in the ordinary sense. So there's no objective reality to it, so that's quite straightforward. But why should imagination be called Svabhava? Well, I suppose it's like dreams, it's like daydreams, imagination. It's got its own kind of reality. We shouldn't dismiss it as untrue or unimportant in its own right. We just mustn't confuse it with reality. And most of us don't have that problem. Most of us are quite clear on the distinction between the two. So the other word that was mentioned was this Paratantra, which means depending on another. And here the Buddhist understanding is largely in keeping with that of modern physics. It's to do with the dependence of one thing on everything else. Things do not exist in isolation. Everything is depending for its existence on something else. Things are universally, mutually conditioned, endlessly related to one another. Dissect an object considered final, and it dissolves itself into airy nothingness. Modern scientists declare that existence is no more than mathematical formulae. So, again, this seems to be the opposite of Svabhava, doesn't it? It just got its own reality once again. Mathematics has its own reality. But there's certainly nothing substantial about it, is there? And yet mathematics is the reality of the physical world. So Professor Suzuki goes on, the imagined view, the Parikalpita of reality, does not give us a true knowledge of it. And the relativity view, Paratantra, reduces it into nothingness. If so, where does our boat of enlightenment get anchored? The Lanka tells us that there is a third way of viewing existence called parinishpana, or perfected, which allows us to become truly acquainted with reality as it is. So this is the Svabhava that the Buddha teaches. So the first one, the imagined view of reality, is the one which most of us actually subscribe to. The Lankavatara Sutra talks of something called the false imagination. There's nothing wrong with imagination as such, but we actually believe the constructs of our imagination to be true. This isn't the scientific reality, the Paratantra. Our reality isn't this Paratantra. We might like to think it is, but our reality is the one of our beliefs. They might be religious beliefs, political beliefs, beliefs about how the world is, how it works, cultural beliefs. This is the reality that we actually do subscribe to. The Parikalpita. This is the reality which we do believe has its own inherent truth. But this is a false imagination. It's a step upwards if we can relate to the second one, the Paratantra, and understand that everything is connected. And many people think that this is the message of spiritual understanding, the interconnectedness of everything. And this is what science is actually telling us now. And I don't want to argue with that. That's certainly a step forward in human development. But spiritually, we're moving on to this thing, to this one Svabhava, this one self-nature, which I would call self with a capital S. It's nothing to do with a personal soul or an individual identity. I've often described it as a sense of being, our sense of being, even though again we're told that we can't really think in terms of being or non-being. I'm talking about a sense of being in the context of our immediate relationship with where we find ourselves. It's perhaps something similar to what the Christians might call a sense of presence. We're not relating to the world as something out there, as something remote, cold, distant, hostile. We're in touch, we have a sense of something which we could perhaps call the innate intelligence of the world. It's an intimate thing. It's that which is closer than breathing, or as the Muslims say, closer than the jugular. Can you get a sense of this? Do you have a sense of this? Do you have a sense of your own being? Do you have a sense of its magnitude, its bigness? This is what the word Svabhava is pointing us to.